everyone. I'm Natasha Ryan, VP of Communications and a podcast host for Time to Head North. And I'm excited to have my colleague, Jared Van Driessche, on today. Jared, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Natasha. I'm so excited to be a part of your podcast because I love listening and watching your past episodes. So it's truly my honor.
Thank you so much. And we're going to get into why Jared's here today. And I think it's going to be kind of a surprise for most. But Jared, we met through the security sector. So if you wouldn't mind just giving people a little snippet about your background.
Yes, absolutely. I've been in the executive protection industry for over 2 decades. I've traveled to more than 80 countries. I've worked with the who's who of Hollywood, entertainment, high net worth individuals. I'm the best-selling co-author of a book titled Public Figures, Private Lives. It's all about how to start, fix, and run protection programs for high net worth individuals and their private family offices. I've written a bunch of blogs online that are kind of shit-talking blogs about the executive protection or security industry and why it's messed up or how it should be better, and kind of poking fun at things that people don't normally poke fun at. So I'm kind of a professional shit talker, if I had to say what my passion is. So, yeah, it's a little bit about me.
Well, that's a first. I don't think I've ever had anyone describe themselves with that title. So I welcome new titles, Jared.
Awesome.
Okay, so I want to talk about specifically why I'm having you on this episode. So you mentioned your ties to working in Hollywood with executives and people in that circle. And Jared and I spoke about a side project he has going on. And I think it's always fascinating to me from someone that came outside of this sector to come in and hear the stories of who people are behind the curtain and kind of what they went through in their lives and what led them to this road. And yours is a particularly challenging story to hear. So as I've done in the past, I would like to take a moment to warn whoever's listening. This is going to be heavy content with some graphic information that is not pleasant. So you need to temper your expectations and know that it's not going to be smooth waters on this episode. But we're not going to shy away from anything hard to discuss because we want to educate and share knowledge, because in this particular scenario, I would assume that part of the healing process was for you to be vulnerable enough to share your story, right? And I want you to kind of talk about, before we launch into what inspired your story, let's talk about what you're trying to accomplish at this moment.
In terms of this podcast or my side project?
The side project, yeah.
Yeah, so for the last 2.5 years, I've been working on a film about my life. So it's essentially about my brother and I, and the crazy abuse that we endured growing up in Alaska and being pitted against each other by our father, and essentially coming to terms of falling back into each other's lives and figuring out that, the brother relationship is really important, and, how do we heal and how do we support each other, and what type of trauma, how trauma can affect people in different ways, because we've had kind of 2 different paths in life, and I could have easily gone down a different road than I did today. So that's my passion project, and something that I'm working on basically every waking hour outside of my normal 9-to-5 job.
And when we are talking about the level of abuse, this is not just you got a beating with a belt. This far exceeds that from what I've been told. So again, we'll launch in, but what made you seek to do this? What made you write the screenplay? What made you start telling your story? Was there a moment where you're like, I will no longer hold this in, I want to just share this? Like what forced that out?
I think it's a number of different things. It's realizing how fucked up everything was in my life. And as a child that's abused, you don't really realize that your life is as fucked up as it is, because it's all you know. That's all you've ever lived in.
You normalize it.
I've had a lot of hard things happen in my life, and I've had self-reflection, and I've been the person that has gone to years and years of therapy. And I know that's not really something comfortable for, tough guys and gals in our industry to talk about. But yeah, I've gone to a ton of therapy. I've examined my life. I've examined myself, and I've really looked at things from really an objective point of view. And it's like, I don't give a fuck anymore about holding on to family secrets or uh, pretending that there is some sort of facade of what the family was supposed to be or should be or any of that bullshit. So it's kind of like, it is what it is. If you want to judge me on that, I don't care. And yeah, it's kind of soul cleansing in the sense of using a term that I don't believe in. But yes.
I do. Okay. So let's talk about it. So bring me through the childhood, bring me through the what you're writing about.
Yeah, so essentially, I grew up as a first generation American on my father's side in Europe, in Alaska, and my father's from Europe. It was crazy, crazy childhood. I'll give you a couple of examples. I mean, in the second grade, the teacher made me sit at a different table during lunch because I brought in a boiled rabbit skull that I ate in front of the second grade class, because that was something normal that we ate at dinner, and we cooked rabbits and butchered rabbits. But my father thought it was like a funny thing that he was all about the shock and the awe. And then you don't realize in the second grade, like, why is this weird? When I'm
Yeah.
cracking the skull open and sucking the brain out and eating the tongue and all the meat around the cheeks of this little rabbit's head, and everybody has their fucking snack pack and their Lunchables
Yeah.
lunch, and I'm dealing with that. Um, and then just all the crazy physical abuse. We were in a quote unquote religion, which to me, all religions are cults. I don't care how big or how small they were. We were raised in the Baha'i faith, which is like a weird Middle Eastern religion, in the 17 or 1800s that came up with, but yet it's a bunch of white people from Wisconsin or Michigan that tend to be part of this Iranian religion, in America at least. And so there's 6 million members of this religion, but it was very odd and strange. And my father was like this kind of head honcho Baha'i character, and he would take in all these troubled youth and give them tough love. And he was a soul healer, and all this kind of propaganda. And he ended up taking advantage of these kids. Come to find out, he's a pedophile. And he was super abusive. Like, my therapist said, the abuse that I endured is the worst that she ever heard of in her 20-year career, which I kind of have some pride for. Like, hey, I'm number one in something. But all joking aside, it was really fucked up. It was really bad. And, I think the psychology of why I protect people or why I do what I do was essentially boils down to, I never felt protected growing up. And so I get that dopamine hit. I get that excitement. I feel powerful. I feel purposeful when I get to protect others. And that's kind of been my life path that I've gone down. And it has really helped me. And, I should be in probably jail if I didn't have this purpose. And that might sound silly or hokey or whatever, but it's true. I deal with a lot of anger issues, a lot of pain, and it's something that I still process. I still deal with all of that shit today. I mean, there's not a day that I go by, even being in my 40s now, where I don't have some suicidal ideology. And I don't know if you know the difference between suicidal ideology and being suicidal. There's kind of two different things in regards to that. So being suicidal is somebody that thinks about suicide, is planning their suicide, has an idea of how they're going to do it. I'm not necessarily suicidal, but I think about suicide all the time. And I think about it in like it's a warm blanket of thinking that I won't be here anymore, and I won't be on this earth anymore, and I won't have to deal with the bullshit that I've dealt with. And so there's a difference there. But and I have a lovely wife, and two beautiful children, and all these things to live for. But I still battle with it in my brain every day. Like, I don't really want to be here. I struggle with wanting to live. Like, death is the ultimate comfort in my mind. And that's something that I've had to learn, and I've had to learn why. And I know that this is all shit that you're not supposed to talk about, right? We're supposed to keep all this quiet and secret and not be vulnerable. But again, I don't care anymore. So I'm open about it.
So let me ask you this. Going back, and I want to continue down this path, but going back to, you said your dad tried to break you and your brother apart. What did that look like?
It was, all about being tough and resilient and pitting us against each other. I mean, one of the, I'm just going to dive into it, but one of the worst things that happened to me, and I wasn't really potty trained till I was 10 years old. And the reason for that is because my father used to make me eat my own feces. It was like a punishment thing. And he would be like, well, I'm doing this for your own good. And my brother was there. My older brother's 4 years older than me, was there. And he would like cheer my father on, in the sense of like, yeah, make him do this, make him eat his own shit. This is going to help him and fix him. And so, that was like the most horrible thing, not only having your father do this to you, but having your brother that you look up to as your hero and your protector and all those things, mock you and make fun of you because you can't hold your own shit in, and encourage your father to make you eat your own shit was not the most pleasant of things. And so it was kind of a lifetime of that kind of thing, like who's tougher, who's stronger. You're going to make each other stronger by mercilessly, hazing the shit out of each other. So that was kind of how I grew up with my brother, and obviously it was not a good thing.
You kind of mentioned when you're in that environment, the way you survive it, or you don't even know you're doing it to survive, is you normalize it. When did it hit you? When did you realize the gravity of how truly horrific that was? Like, what age? Like, what was the progression and the realization of how gnarly it actually was?
Probably around 15 or 16, because we had all these, troubled youth that would come in and stay with us. And it would be, there would be some accusations like, your father has been inappropriate with this young girl or whatever. And he was so good about manipulating us and getting in her head and being like, these are all troubled kids, they're lying or whatever. But when there's smoke, there's usually fire. And when you have, many, many girls over and women over a period of time that make the accusation, it's like you can deny all fucking day long, but you look in the mirror and you're like, okay, this kind of resonates as true. And my father was so good at being like, I'm doing this because I love you and I'm making you strong and all that. And he just was like the master manipulator, a total sociopath. And so when I was 15 or 16, I spent some time away from the family, and I just broke down sobbing and crying. And it was like like I didn't realize the gravity. He used to make me eat my own shit. Like, that is
Right.
horrible. And then
Horrible.
I mean, beyond. And there's no excuse for that at all whatsoever. And he's like, oh, I've apologized and blah, blah, blah. You can't apologize for shit like that. It's like certain things that you do, those are unforgivable things. And being a father was another kind of turning point for me, where you think you have all this shit figured out. And then I didn't want to have boys for the sake of, I just thought my softer side would come out if I had daughters. And unfortunately I had two boys. And so I had to kind of really look at everything closely and deal with it. And I kind of went crazy after being a father, because it was like drumming up all this old shit. And this is the abuse that I dealt with when I was 3 or 5 or 6 or 8. And so it's been tremendously hard, and it's not fun to look at yourself and be like, well, I'm fucked up because this abuse happened. And it's easier just to bury shit under, to sweep it under the rug, which the majority of society does. So, yeah, that's not been the case for me.
Who did you first decide to, I mean, as you went, I'm thinking like you have a wife, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I work with an organization that helps adults who endured child sex abuse and never dealt with it and put it under the rug. And then they have all of these problems functioning as adults. So they do group therapy, right? But they also bring in like everyone's support staff and loved ones to help them learn how to help support. I mean, it must be challenging having a past like that and triggers and being able to have a healthy functioning relationship. I mean, this affects every facet of your life, your childhood, right? Like therapists say behind every hurt human is a wounded child, right? That was not addressed at the time. So, I mean, what is it like to try to have these healthy relationships in your life, your family, when you have all of this stuff going on? I mean, that must be incredibly difficult at times.
Yeah, I mean, it's challenging. It's like my pulse doesn't get going over, like little things. And my wife, I love her to death. I met her in the 5th grade. She was actually one of the catalysts of helping me not shit my pants anymore, because we had this like beautiful little brown girl from California that moved up to Alaska, and she was like the most amazing friend and wonderful human being. And it was like I kind of latched on to her friendship as a way to kind of get me through all of this pain and suffering that I was dealing with. And I don't even think she realized or understood what everything was, or all the shit I dealt with for a very long time. But she essentially saved my life. We've been married now for many years, and but I think she truly saved me. But I struggle all the time. Due to the extreme trauma and everything that I've experienced, I don't quite understand or relate to people that don't have that a lot of the time. So like, there's no social norms for me. I think you can talk about everything, you can say anything, and so I'll have to check in my wife and be like, is this appropriate, or is this not okay? Because I don't understand. Even at 40 years old, I don't understand this because of just the craziness of my childhood. It's like, I have no issue with confrontation of any kind, whether that's physical, that's emotional, that's any sort of tough conversation. I can have all of those things. And so it's like I automatically assume that everybody is like me when people are not. And there are social norms and topics that you can't discuss or things that you can't get into. And so my wife has certainly had to try and temper me a little bit with all of those things. And I'm trying to learn, but it's certainly been a challenge for me.
How do you think that affects your job in the security sector?
I think it can be good and it can be bad. I mean, every gift that you have is also a double-edged sword, and it can be a curse. I've done many things and traveled the world and stood next to the most powerful people in the world, and have been able to do that because of my upbringing and my confidence and my aggressiveness, or my not having fear. But it's also hindered me in other aspects, in the sense of maybe I said the wrong thing at the wrong time and I offended this principal, or nobody's ever talked to this person in this particular way, and I did, and then this principal doesn't like me anymore. And then on the flip side, I've had principals that love my candor and directness and straightforwardness and wild side. So, teach his own, right?
Yeah, interesting. I have to ask, what happened to your dad?
Well, he's dead to me, but he's not dead yet. But he's very close. He's been bedridden for many years, and the family has confronted him, and he knows what we think now. And so, if there is a God, I pray every day that he'll die and be dead any minute, but I haven't been blessed with that phone call yet.
There, is there some sort of, conflict in your existence where you would like to just go do it yourself?
Yes. And I've thought about that quite a bit. Um, because we had these, like I said, we had these kids that live with us, and then it was like
Yeah.
all this, uh, it was all this manipulation and pressure. Like, okay, this new girl's coming in. This is your sister now. She's your sister. We are a family. We are one big family. And then these kids would leave for, uh, one reason or another, or a kid would commit suicide. And it's like, well, my sister just died, right? My adopted sister just died. And so we had many of these kids come and go and then not realize why they left. And then they'd reach out years later because they've been manipulated by my father. Like, this is your family too. And
Yeah.
so they'd be like, I love you. I miss you. Here's pictures from old times. And I'm like, well, what happened? Whatever happened? Well, your dad raped me when I was 13 years old. And then you're like, holy shit. And it's like, I cannot deny that fact anymore. And it would be so easy to just say, oh, well, that was a long time ago. And who knows what this woman's intentions are. She's in her 40s now. And, it's a lie. And it's easy to do all that. It's not easy to face it and say, your father's a fucking piece of shit. And so, it had all that manipulation. This is your sister, this is your brother, and so I think of these people still as my sisters and my brothers that had, tremendous abuse happen. And so, yeah, like I can't see him anymore because I think that I would probably kill him.
Yeah.
And I don't think I could control my rage in order to not do that. And I don't have any sort of moral issue with murder in that sense. Like, I don't think that I would be wrong in murdering my father, but society certainly would think that, and I would go to prison, and then my children would have a father locked away, and my wife would be alone, and all of that. So
All the things.
yeah, so it's not the crime that would stop me from doing it. So yeah, to answer your question, yeah, I think about his murder all the time and think about committing his murder all the time, but I'm not doing it, obviously.
Did you ever battle internally questioning whether you had a little bit of your father in you?
All the time.
That must be hard.
It's extremely hard. I mean, I look in the mirror and I'm like, I'm a son of a pedophile, like, what kind of sick shit was my father thinking about when he impregnated my mother, and I'm like, that's who I am. I am the son of a pedophile, rapist, sociopath, psychopath. And I don't know what the difference is in sociopath or psychopath, but I think there's some differences, but I don't know. He ticks all the boxes that I've seen. And so that's hard for me. And it's like, yeah, I'm not him. I never raped anybody. I don't abuse my kids. I slapped my kid one time in the face, and I felt so bad for doing it, but it was like a reaction. My kid like slapped me, and then I like slapped him, and I was like, oh my God, like I can't do that. I got to break that cycle. But yeah, it's hard. I struggle with it every day. It's like I have the fucking demon inside me. I am genetically made up from this person, So, and everybody's like, oh, you got to get over that. You're not him, blah, 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 blah. Like, okay, but that's who I'm from. So it's really weird.
Yeah. Did your dad ever face any criminal charges? Was he ever held accountable?
We had police come by different times for different things. And he was pretty slick with different things. Like, this one girl that recently in the last few years, came out and shared, her story of being raped by him. She doesn't want to press charges. She's like, I've processed it, I've gone through it. Um, I don't need to dredge it up. She actually went back to Alaska and talked to him and confronted him and all of
She
this.
did.
Yeah. And my father's like, oh, I've changed or I'm different or whatever. The only thing that's changed is you're bedridden, you broke your back,
You can't do it anymore.
can't do anything. But he tries to manipulate and everything from his stunted physical position. Now he still would do all of those things and tries to manipulate even to this day. So the answer is no. There was accusations of molesting women that were there. Some of them were 18. Others said he kissed them inappropriately or touched them or whatever. And it was also like, I think the Baha'i faith, all the Baha'is were very worried about protecting their faith. And so it was like, let's take all the kids out, but I don't know if we should press any sort of charges or whatever. It's like, that's like cult mentality for me. So I wish he saw some sort of criminal charges for it, but that hasn't been the case. And what is crazy now is, now that anybody asks about my father, I'm pretty open about, I don't talk to him. Like, why? And I will explain, and then people are like, oh my God, your dad is fucking horrible. He did this in 1992, or he did this in 1998, or my sister said never go over to his house because he's a demon. I could never come over to your house as a kid, or made my mom really uncomfortable. And so he was like super charming, and he could get away with this, he could get away with things because he talked the talk. I mean, I remember being a kid and having a little sister, and little kids will fight sometimes. And I remember I pushed my sister, and he beat the fuck out of me. And it was like, you never hit women, you never abuse women. It was like, okay, like, this is like, I'll never do this. But yet he's abusing women and girls and doing this thing. And maybe it was like an internal struggle that he had in the sense of trying to raise his kids to be different. But he was so charming and so slick. And so it was like, there was these people that would meet my father and be like, oh my God, he's the most amazing, wonderful, special person ever. And then other people would meet him and be able to see through it and be like, he's a fucking weasel. And it's just crazy. It's so nuts thinking about it all, Natasha. So, yeah.
How did you and your brother survive being pitted against each other? And how did you come back together if you did, in fact, ever split?
Well, it was kind of realizing how fucked up everything was in our childhood and being honest and having those conversations. And we've always been super honest with each other. And I kind of had a ton of professional success. He's been beating his head on Hollywood's door for the last 20 years. He's been involved in some crimes and some things. And so it was just like, he had a lot of stuff to apologize for, and I had stuff to apologize for. And life is better when you have your brother in it with you and you can talk, and, you're not judged by a brother like you would be, a friend that you don't know. I mean, he knows where all the bodies are buried, all the skeletons are, he's dealt with things. And so it's just, we check each other like, hey, and are very honest. And it's been better having my brother in our life, in each other's lives than not. And I don't know. It's just been kind of a progression of that. And so,
yeah, I mean, you two could understand what truly went on behind closed doors and what you went through, right? So I am glad you were able to reconcile and do all the things. And I kind of want to talk about moving along to the Hollywood side of this. You know, where does everything stand? You've written this screenplay about what you went through. What's the reception you're getting? Where are you at with all of it?
Yeah, we got a ton of great reception with it. We've submitted our screenplay to like independent a company called Slated that actually grades your screenplay on like, hey, should this be made a movie? And typically these are executives that have made movies, have green lit movies, and so we got a lot of positive comments on that. And we've engaged a company that is actually helping us produce this film, so it's easier for them to reach out to talent and directors and actors to get this thing going than it just being Jared Van Driessche or my brother Andre Van Driessche reaching out, cold calling directors and actors. I actually have some representation, which has been great. So I have a financial budget. I've got a pitch deck. I've got basically everything we need, a schedule, basically everything we need to get this going. And it's about getting directors attached to this project at this point. And so it's a slow process in the sense that you have to send it out to a director. You have to give them opportunity and time to read it. And so I think the first director that have approached it has the material now. And so it's just a matter of waiting a couple weeks or a month or so to see what they think and if it resonates with them or not. Because obviously the story isn't for everybody. And typically, I think people that know me or whatever were like, well, you should make a movie about all the famous people that you work with and all the missions that you've gone on and all the amazing stuff that you've done where your principles have been attacked and you quote unquote saved the day or whatever, Hollywood-esque type story it is or could be. But what we're writing is about our childhood, all the trauma, all the craziness, a little bit about what I've done in my adulthood and just kind of how it came full circle and us coming together. And, I have a big chip on my shoulder. And so I had a lot of people tell me I couldn't do what I do in this industry based on my family history, based on where I grew up and in that small town in Alaska. And so it's not the most healthy thing to do things to prove people wrong, but that's absolutely been the fucking jet fuel that I've used for my success. And so that's probably one of the unhealthy reasons of wanting to get this film made is to prove people wrong. But I'll take whatever negative shit I can and turn it into fuel. So
why do you think people should hear your story? What do you hope they walk away from the theater?
I hope they walk away understanding that they're not alone in their own trials and tribulations. Like, you never know what people are dealing with, right? You don't know. You can, you work in a company with hundreds of people or thousands of people or whatever. You don't know what people are dealing with. And so I don't think that there are many people that I've met that are truly honest about their own shortcomings. Like, I'm not painting myself to be a fucking hero in this story. I do plenty of bad shit. My brother does plenty of bad shit. We do bad shit to each other. But it's a matter of being honest about it. And I think that the world needs honesty, and they're craving that. It's like, I don't give a shit if it's bad or good or whatever. It needs to be real. And I think people need that today. And I don't see a lot of that out there. It's kind of this whitewash bullshit, right?
This is where I was taking the conversation next, because I think that, 10 years ago, I don't think we'd be having this conversation on a podcast that's going to be pushed out to the public. And I think that you are absolutely correct. And this is what I say from a communications perspective, right? Is that we do not live in a society like we did 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 50 years ago. People want authenticity and vulnerability. They want to see it. They want to feel it. And those are the stories they're interested in hearing. And so, it's interesting to me. We talk about hard subject matter. Sound of Freedom just came out, watching the reception of that. And that was done tastefully, right? So, like, I wonder if this is like, are we ready? Are we ready to really tackle hard stuff to try to make the world truly a better place, right? So I think part of that is you have to know the evil that exists, face it, understand it's a reality to combat it, right? And protect future victims. So I applaud you sharing.
Mhm.
I want to talk about it coming full circle because, obviously there were so many people that came in and out of that home that you couldn't protect. You couldn't protect yourself. So it seems natural to me that here we are, you ended up as a protector.
Yeah.
So you talk about the jet fuel, and when you are in these moments of protecting people, I would imagine that is baggage you carry with you of all the people you couldn't protect, and it makes you actually maybe a little bit better or more emotionally invested. Is that
Ye-
true?
Yeah, definitely. And it's like, you know, I was a kid, but I certainly, took place in my own abuse with these kids. I mean, I remember there's one particular kid that we had. We used to tease him, mercilessly, and he had like warts on his hands. And so it was all about like in our house to be tough and strong or whatever. And we like convinced this kid that he was disgusting. So we cut off his warts with like shears and bolt cutters, and then we put a knife in the fire and we burned his hands to cauterize the wound. And I mean that is like some real torture shit. And I mean that was stuff that I dealt with. That was normal for me. And so I feel tremendous guilt for that. Like there's no excuse for it. Yeah, I was a kid or whatever, and that was the environment that we lived in. But fuck, I should have never done that. And so this is the only way that I know to help is to help people. And I mean, I've worked with legitimate people that have threats against their life, that people have tried to kill them and hurt them and harm them. And it's probably a fucked up psychology thing, but it feels good to be the person standing in between them and danger. And I get a lot from that. And yeah, and I still battle with guilt and shame and things I've done and the family that I'm from and all of those things.
It
So
sounds like you view this as your penance. And I wonder, when is enough going to be enough that you completely forgive yourself or absolve yourself of the guilt and give yourself full grace? Do you think that's ever attainable for you?
no, I don't actually. I don't think there's something in my DNA. There's something in me. Like I said, I with that suicidal ideology or the pain or everything, it's like I've done hours of therapy. I've done EMDR. I've taken medication. I do take medication. I've done a lot of things to try and deal with this. And I think it's just a matter of dealing with it every single day. It's much like an addict. I'm not really, uh, I've never done drugs or anything like that, but I think it's maybe like how an alcoholic is, or narcotics, somebody who's on narcotics and trying to kick it. Like it's something that they have to battle with every day, even if they're 20 years sober. And so for me, it's made me fearless in my life. And that's not necessarily a good thing because it's careless and I don't value my own life. So then what does that mean about me? What does that mean about my own self esteem? Right? It's a whole vicious cycle.
I'm sitting here and I'm moved to tears, and fighting it back because I just can't imagine that level of internal pain. And I, I just hope one day you're able to, continue your therapy and and give yourself a little more grace. And I hope you do reach a day of, okay, I've done enough to combat the past, right? And I
Yeah.
think you know, I
I'm not punching holes in the wall anymore. I'm not breaking
yep,
my hands on brick walls. I'm not burning myself like I used to burn myself, or pull my hair out like I used to do when I was a teenager, kind of processing all these feelings and pain and all of that. So I'm a lot better. I'm a lot better now than I think I ever been, but it's hard, and it's hard being a father. I mean, God, it's hard because what kind of a example did I have as a father? I didn't have the example that I wanted, and so it's like having to unlearn these things and having to break the cycle of abuse. It's a battle every day, and I think I'm winning, and but it is a struggle, and I think that I'll always struggle with it. And I don't see life as you come to this euphoric, peaceful state and everything is fine. I mean, I think there's peaks and valleys to life, and
yep.
so maybe I'll have it all under control now, and maybe in a couple months I won't, or whatever, and I'll manage it as I go through the rough water. You know.
I think the end message that you want to achieve with your movie, as we've discussed, and kind of where I want to leave this, is I want to end this on a note of, here was this horrific situation you were a part of. And as you said, all signs should have put you down a road of complete destruction and failure.
Mm-hmm.
But you were able to rise above it. You have achieved much success in your life. You have a healthy, wonderful family. I just kind of want to end this on your message of resilience to anyone that is even has either gone through this or is currently in a very tumultuous situation. I kind of want that end message that you would like to offer hope to people that are struggling.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think one of the things that has been a positive for me, and I'll turn a very negative into a positive, is one of the biggest fears that I think people have is being publicly shamed, being embarrassed or ridiculed on stage or in front of a ton of people. So my whole childhood was that, publicly shamed, being from a weird family, mocked, teased, all of those things. And so it's my superpower now to not care, like that your judgment towards me means nothing, or anybody's judgment means nothing at this point. And so I've been very resilient in the sense that, like, I don't give up. I'm super tenacious in goals and things that I want to achieve, and sometimes to my own detriment. And to it's certainly my wife. It's probably not I'm not the easiest person to be in a relationship with, I should say.
No
But,
man is.
yeah. Yes. Thank you. That's very true. But the point is like, you can overcome whatever it is that is your challenge. You just have to push through, and sometimes that's easier said than done. It's always easier said than done, but it is extremely important that you just keep going. And I've always wanted to keep going, and I've always wanted to achieve what I've wanted to do, even when people have said that you can't do that, or that's an impossible dream or goal. And just don't let people beat you down.
And seek out help. Seek
Yeah.
out help. It's okay to not be okay. We always say this, I've heard this from many wonderful humans in the industry. It's okay to not be okay.
Yeah, that's definitely true. And I'm still learning. I don't have all the fucking answers, right?
None of us do, or ever will.
Yeah.
Jared, I cannot thank you enough for sharing this with us, putting this out there. I can't imagine how much it takes to actually get to a point where you can do this. So I congratulate you on that front. And we'll follow your journey. And I hope to see this on the big screens and at the theaters. And I just wish you all the luck with this. Of course, we'll be in touch because we're colleagues, but just thank you to you for coming on.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. And I would say to anybody, it's still a process of getting this movie made. So I don't know, it's going to take me 5 years or 10 years or 3 years or whatever, but I am I am like Sisyphus pushing that rock up the mountain. So, when this gets published, if you know of anybody in the entertainment industry that can help get this thing made, please message me on LinkedIn. Help me get this made. I'm happy to share all the screenplay, all the materials with anybody that's interested in learning more. And I really think this is going to help the world if I can get this thing made. And so I'm putting everything that I can into this. So if you can help me and you're listening to this, please do. I would appreciate it because I need help.
All right. Thank you. And to all of you listening and watching, you can check out more podcast episodes on tngdefense.com. Don't forget to hit the subscribe or like button. Thank you so much. And until next time, have a great day, everyone.
Thank you so much, Natasha.
Thank you, Jared.